Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and I just wanted to jump in here before we start our next series to talk about some potential changes I've been thinking about. This is mostly something that will only affect the YouTube version of the podcast, but for transparency's sake and the fact that I will be introducing the next mini-series, I think I'll be releasing it on both the audio and video versions of the podcast. If you are a die-hard listener who waits for every episode, you probably noticed that the last episode of the Jurassic Park series was about 4 days late from my attempted every other week schedule. Which, in the grand scheme of things, is not a huge deal, but it's not really what I wanted, and I'm really trying to make sure I stick to a schedule. Part of the issue is just how absolutely jam-packed my schedule has been since April. Not just my podcast schedule, but also my real-life job schedule. I've been working late almost every day so far in May. My day job is filming for a local cable channel, and the end of the school year is always absolutely slammed with stuff to do. For the most part, I'm mostly fine with my podcast schedules getting interrupted. If I need to take a week off, it's not usually a huge deal. But out of all the podcasts I do, Every Version Ever is kind of my favorite. Plus, skipping a week is more likely to mess up my schedule here than anywhere else, and I always just overall feel a lot worse about skipping a week for Every Version Ever, especially during the miniseries where I was already doing every other week. I plan the farthest ahead for this show, and skipping a week can sometimes force me to fully rethink how and when I release episodes for like a month. More if we're coming close to a time-specific series like July, where I'm planning another Christmas in July miniseries, but I have 6 episodes of another Fairy Tales miniseries in the works that I need to get through first. So, and not that this will fix every issue, but in the interest of keeping myself on schedule, for at least this show, I'm going to rethink how I do video versions for this podcast. Again, audio should be unaffected. This is a video-only issue. I like some aspects of making a video version of my podcast, but by far my favorite part of the process is editing the audio, and to that end, I'm going to prioritize the audio. If I don't have time to fully cut together like an elaborate opening out of trailer footage and music, I'm going to stick with a picture and probably some generic YouTube audio library music, which, to be fair, is usually pretty good. YouTube has done a pretty admirable job of making sure they keep their free audio library updated with some good stuff. I will say though, if I have a specific idea for music in the podcast, like music that comes from whatever we're talking about, I will still do it for the audio version. As far as I know, Red Circle isn't going to flag me for copyrighted music like YouTube. For example, with the Jurassic Park miniseries, I had to swap out the actual Jurassic Park theme for a more generic piece of music for the outro. I fully intended to use the theme over the outro, but it was flagged immediately. But I still used it in all the episodes on the movies for the audio version, because I put a ton of work into that outro, and even if I couldn't pair it with the visuals, I still wanted the original music somewhere. Which, on that note, one thing that kept stopping me in my tracks with the Jurassic Park series was how many times I needed to upload a test video to make sure my intros and outros were not going to get flagged for copyright. I think all my episodes went through anywhere between 2 and 5 different intros, trying to get something to pass YouTube's evil AI copyright bots. At least once so far, even after the copyright cleared, a week after the episode went live, it still got flagged. And obviously this kind of sucks the fun out of things for me. One of my biggest motivations for leaving Spotify at the beginning of the year was getting away from their ridiculous policing of copyright, which in their case was usually completely false, which makes YouTube kind of marginally better by default, but they still have a really awful fair use system that needs to be thrown out and rebuilt from the ground up. Like, I got a strike on my main channel earlier this year for a video that was literally 4 years old and fell squarely within the realm of fair use. Not all companies completely disregard fair use, like a few of the really worst ones. I'm looking at you, Universal, and the Hallmark Channel, and Random House. I loved Random House as a kid. My most recent strike came from Random House. The absolute betrayal. So I think I'm moving away from using much footage at all on the YouTube channel for Every Version Ever. For some episodes, I may try to make a quote-unquote deluxe version for my main channel, but that's going to be like a low priority project and will probably come out at a much later date, when I actually have time to mess around with trying to get something past YouTube's bots. I've already started doing something like this with my Disney Movie Marathon podcast, but I probably did something a bit more drastic there than I really wanted to do here. I started the year out by completely ending the standalone YouTube channel I had for the Disney Movie Marathon, and on that podcast I am now focused solely on audio. I do plan to make a video version of each episode for my main channel at some point, but so far I haven't worried about that all year, and it has been really freeing to not worry about the video, so I can stay on my new every other week schedule for that show. However, with Every Version Ever, I don't want to end its YouTube channel like I did for the Disney Movie Marathon. For starters, this channel has more subscribers than my main channel, and even though it gets fewer overall views than my main channel, I know a lot of people subscribe here because they like the concept of this podcast even if they aren't interested in every miniseries. Which is why I decided to sort of compromise on this one. Instead of completely completely deleting the channel and going audio only, or instead of forcing myself to make a semi-elaborate video for every episode to come out alongside the audio version, potentially putting me behind schedule frequently, I'll focus on making a simpler video that I know won't get held up by copyright, and then at a later date, if I feel it's warranted, I'll make a more detailed video with footage and music for my main channel, provided it passes the copyright bots. Yes, this does sort of mean that I will be double posting some episodes, which I did say I was going to try and get away from, but in the long run, I feel like this is going to save me a lot of time and headache and stress if I can approach editing my Every Version Ever episodes knowing that I'm first and foremost making an audio podcast, and not worrying about how fancy or elaborate I need to make the video version. I know these changes are probably counterintuitive for someone trying to make YouTube videos, but I consider myself first and foremost to be a podcaster, and I consider the Every Version Ever podcast to be my main priority. All my shows are important to me, but I really like making Every Version Ever, and if I'm going to keep a successful, regular schedule here, my priority needs to be on the audio. So, moving on to my next series, we are diving back into fairy tales, this time with a new theme. Last year we spent most of the year on the big three princesses, Cinderella, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty. I have more of those that I want to cover. I even have at least a couple already recorded. See my earlier statement about my schedule getting thrown off by time-sensitive episodes. Those got delayed because of Christmas, and I never got back to them. However, I ultimately decided to save those episodes for a future all-purpose fairy tale series, and do another mini-series with a much narrower scope and a much more limited number of episodes, so I can do more things this year. And this time, instead of princesses, we're focusing on children lost in the woods, so Hansel and Gretel, Little Red Riding Hood, and Goldilocks and the Three Bears. I have a couple episodes that will focus on all three, and at least one episode each solely focused on one version for each fairy tale. I do have more of these characters that I want to get into a future mini-series, but I decided that this will serve as sort of an introduction to these characters, and then they can join the princesses when I come back to a more general, free-for-all fairy tale series. So I think that's all for now. Thanks for listening, thanks for bearing with all these changes I've been making, and we'll see you again soon for more Every Version Ever, specifically every fairy tale ever, and even more specifically for the next episode, another episode in my series with Callum from Once Upon a VHS on Shelley Duvall's Fairy Tale Theater. So we'll see you again soon.